Hey everybody, Crow back again, and this is another video response. On my last video response to Top 3 Tuesday, I actually got a comment by a YouTuber by the name of Novabug, who said, you know what, if I missed the Top 3 Tuesday, I might be interested in his Friday Foursome. And what Novabug may or may not know is that I already subscribed to Novabug, and I knew about the Friday Foursome. I just never really responded to them before. And actually, he did them for a while, I guess. They're not weekly like the Top 3 Tuesdays were, so I guess that's why maybe I've forgotten about it. But he did one recently, and I think it was like months since he, or maybe even a year, I don't know, since the last one. So this is like the Friday Foursome number 17. But in that video, when I finally did watch it, he said that it would be something he'd be trying to do at least once a month, I think. And I think that's doable. So I'm going to try and do the Friday Foursomes from now on. And this Friday Foursome is your most anticipated systems. So I guess consoles, game systems that you were like all hyped for to get. And that way you thought of them when you finally did get them. So I know that a lot of people have already done responses to this, and I think I'm about a week or two late, but since he's doing this every month, you know, I got a month to make a video response. So here's mine. I have selected 4 systems here that I was pretty much hyped for to get. What's funny is that the reason he brought this up is because of the Nintendo Switch coming out actually less than a week from now. And I do have one pre-ordered, but I'm not really hyped for it. There's really, I don't know, it's just, the hype isn't there for me. I'm going to get it. The opportunity came up to pre-order one. I pre-ordered one. That's why I'm getting it. I've got the Zelda game coming. I'm not even hyped for that. I'm not a big, huge Zelda fan. But, you know, I'm getting off track. Let's go with, there's no fancy graphics or anything in this video. I just have all the systems here that I'm going to talk about. So the first one I'm going to talk about, the first system I was truly hyped for, is this right here, the Super Nintendo. And the story about the Super Nintendo was that back then I was buying a lot of video game magazines, or at least one magazine a month. So in these magazines they would talk about the Super Nintendo, what it was going to have. You'd see pictures of the graphics. I was like, those graphics look amazing. They simply look amazing. And I remember even at school, it was kind of a joke how, you know, everybody had played Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, and they're like, oh, there's going to be a 16-bit Mario, and that just seems so weird. It was almost like a joke. Yeah, so I was actually planning on saving up the money to purchase this myself. $200 I was trying to save up, you know, foregoing the fact that I forgot that I would have to pay tax as well. But it didn't matter because I didn't even reach 25% of my goal before my uncle bought a Super Nintendo for us as kind of a gift. So we got the Super Nintendo. We got actually 2 games with it, 2 or 3 games, I can't really remember, but I know for sure, of course, the system came with Super Mario World. It was the pack-in, and I know that he also bought, we also bought Lemmings. I don't know who bought it, I wasn't with him when he bought it, but I know Super Mario World for sure, and Lemmings, and the reason he went with Lemmings, or my dad bought Lemmings, I don't know exactly who bought it, was because it was a PC game that we were playing on the PC a lot. We'd go over to his house and we'd play on his PC and play Lemmings. So we didn't really have the IBM compatibles back in the day. We still, you know, this is 92 or something like that, and we're still playing on our Commodore 64. And we did have older computers, but they, you know, we didn't have the ad-lib card or anything. So we got Lemmings. And the advantage with that Lemmings was that it was a 2-player game. You could play 2 players. And, you know, honestly, as a kid, Super Nintendo blew my mind. Going from Nintendo to Super Nintendo obviously blows your mind. And then either on the same day or shortly thereafter, we got Pilot Wings, and this game was just amazing. I know that if, you know, people play this today, it doesn't really seem like much, but back then, it was just amazing. And these were all launch games. I don't think Lemmings was. It came out shortly after launch. We didn't get it, the Super Nintendo, at launch, but it was shortly thereafter, I believe. So, So yeah, it was just mind-blowing. No regrets there. And everything. I really don't have anything bad to say. I mean, you could say bad things about some of the games that came out, but I really can't knock the Super Nintendo for anything, even today. Now, let's move on to the second system that I was kind of hyped for. Now, this is kind of an oddity because the system came out while I was in the military. So, what I'm going to talk, it might be easier if I just brought it out here. It's the PlayStation, and this is a sticker from a PlayStation magazine that I used to buy pretty often. They had a sticker in the magazine, so I plopped this sticker on there. This isn't the original one. This is actually a mishmash of a couple other PlayStations put together. And, oh wow, I even etched my name into the back of this. I don't know if you can see that. There's my, I forgot I even did that. But this is also modded at this point too, so PlayStation. Again, I would see the images. This is still before kind of the internet. I mean, the internet was kind of just in its infancy at the time, like the way we know it today. I know the internet's been around a lot longer than 95, but I would go, I'd see the pictures in the magazines, but, you know, it's like these pictures look way too good to believe. You know, I don't know. I wasn't really sold on it. But then in the summer of 95, I was in boot camp for a couple weeks. And then I went to technical school for 9 months in the Air Force. So, you know, we were in our dorm rooms and whatnot. And I was walking down the dorm room. And somebody had their door open. There were a bunch of guys in there. I look in there and they're playing Battle Arena Toshinden on the PlayStation. And I stood there and I just stared at it for like half a minute. And that's when I realized I have to get this game system. Now, this was already a couple months after release. I think this was even like February or March the next year. So I had the money. It was $300 at the time. I bought it, and I bought one game to go with it. And it wasn't Battle Arena Edition, and I bought Wipeout. And I brought it back to my room, plugged it in, and I was blown away by Wipeout. I felt that the $300+ I spent alone was just worth it for Wipeout. It was like nothing I'd ever played before, nothing I'd ever seen. The graphics were just amazing at the time. And then, you know, as time went on, I did get more and more games. And very rarely during those days was there a time where I said I bought a game and I regretted it. Even Beyond the Beyond, which you know, the PlayStation was kind of the system that really got me into RPGs. Not only because of Final Fantasy VII, but even before that, with Wild Arms and Beyond the Beyond, I just started getting really into RPGs and Persona, Revelations Persona. Persona, my favorite RPG still of all time. Final Fantasy VII, my favorite Final Fantasy game. And I would go and rent a game like every day for the PlayStation. It was on my way to and from where I needed to be on the base. There was a video rental place where you could rent things like $1 a day. And I would literally go there like every day and be like, yeah, gotta try the next one. Yeah, gotta try the next game. And then occasionally I would say, oh, I really like that game, and I'd have to buy it. I played a ton of games on the PlayStation. The only bad thing I have to say about the PlayStation overall is that the early models were tend to overheating. And yeah, I wound up with, you know, at least 3 having to buy another PlayStation again and again, at least 2 more times over the time I was playing with the PlayStations, just because they would break. So that's the only downside with the PlayStation, I think. And, you know, eventually they had the original PlayStation controller. They didn't have the analog sticks, but it didn't really matter. It was more like comparing it to the Super Nintendo at the time. And then the Nintendo 64 came out, and then, of course, Sony was like, well, we gotta put analog sticks in our controller too, and that's what they did. Next game system I'm going to talk about here. The next one I was really hyped for. Now this one this one may be the one that I was hyped for absolutely the most, and we got to talk about the PlayStation 2. And of course I got to talk about the PlayStation 2. I got to find a place to put this, like the monolith here. And of course I got to talk about the PlayStation 2 because by the time it came out, which was around the early 2000s, I can't remember exactly the year. Yeah, it was like maybe 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. that's when, you know, the internet was really starting to take off, and I would start looking up videos on the internet for things and everything, and you would see all these videos for PlayStation 2. And the internet, the video on the internet is definitely not like it is today. It was all really small, really grainy. So I'd see all this stuff, and I just knowing what I experienced in the PlayStation, I'd want that again. So they did game reserves a lot differently way back in the day. They were taking I'm talking about GameStop here. Cherry Vale Mall in Rockford is where I pre-ordered this. This isn't exactly the same one. This is just another one. But almost a year before the launch date of the PlayStation 2, the GameStop was taking pre-orders for it. And almost a year before launch, they had already sold out of their reserves. So I got put on the list for a second batch. And this was a year before the PlayStation 2 was released. So what was interesting about GameStop back then is they would give you a ton of money for games you would trade in. I remember trading in Genesis games that were utter crap for $5 credit towards the PlayStation 2. Well, because they gave you more money towards other reserves. So I had a ton of DVDs back at the time I no longer wanted. We're talking about the old Dragon Ball Z DVDs that only had like 3 episodes on a disc. I would get $5 credit for each of those. Well, actually, $5 credit for those DVDs. That was when they first started taking DVDs, now that I think about it. So I was getting $5 per every DVD, even though if it was total crap. And then I had a bunch of Genesis games that I didn't even have a Genesis anymore at that point. And I was getting a ton of money for these Genesis games. All said and done, I had $600 credit towards PlayStation 2. Now, eventually, over time, the people have canceled their pre-orders. I got bumped up to the first list of this. And I remember on launch day, I actually had class at 8 a.m. that day because I was in college at the time. And I actually drove from DeKalb to Rockford, which is at least a 45-minute drive early in the morning to pick up my PlayStation 2. Picked it up, came back. I had about an hour before class. It was already like 7 a.m. They opened super early that day because of the PlayStation. They opened when the mall opened for the mall walkers, pretty much. And it was 7 o'clock. I had 8 o'clock before class, and I couldn't wait. Hooked it up, and I was playing. Let's see, I bought 3 games. One game I don't have anymore, Swing Away Golf. And now I played Swing Away Golf like that, and I was amazed. Now the other 2 games I bought, then I went, after an hour, I was like, I have to go to class. Went to class, came back, and played games the whole rest of the day. Tekken Tag Tournament was another game I bought on launch day. Dead or Alive Hardcore, I know we'll say unlisted it was available on launch day, but it actually wasn't available till like 2 days after for some reason. But I'm going to count it as a launch game. And these games just blew me away. I was already loving the Tekken games on the PlayStation, but Tekken Tag Tournament really blew me away. I mean, there was PlayStation 2, I mean, all that hype, a year's worth of hype, waiting to get that system, and then finally getting it, and then just totally being blown away. Yeah, again, the only downside with the PlayStation 2 is that it broke more often than the original PlayStation. So I think I went through more PlayStation 2s. I know I have another one with a different shell, and that is also modded, so it goes importing games for that as well over time. Again, very few and far between that I would find a game that, or at least back in the day, where I would get a game, buy a game brand new, and be disappointed by it. Yeah, it's just, to me, this is where the graphics thing and the awe of graphics really ended with the PlayStation 2, because PlayStation 3, I really had no hype for that. I was like, well, that just looks a little bit better than PlayStation 2. That's what I thought at the time. And then, PlayStation 4, same thing. It's like, that doesn't look much better than the PlayStation 3. That's just in my mind. Same thing with when I saw the Xbox 360, when I saw the, Xbox One, of course. It's like, yeah. It was all the different features that, that I really wasn't aware of that at the time that I should have been hyped for, but I really wasn't, because I was just looking at the games thinking, whatever. But yeah, PlayStation 2. And then I saved kind of an odd one for last here, because I was kind of hyped for it. And now this was something that was a gift, and this is actually something more recent. This is actually a current system here, the PlayStation Vita. I was hyped for this. Maybe not as much as I was hyped for the PlayStation 2, but we got this reserved. My wife actually wound up buying this for me. But when I first saw it, what's funny is that the PSP, I should mention the PSP, I was kind of against I was like the anti-hype machine against the PSP. When I saw stuff like that, I was like, that looks too expensive. Look at I don't understand why people would pay that much. Because that was mainly because I was playing my Nintendo DS at the time. I think the DS was out at the same time. Yeah, and yeah, I had the DS, and I was like, blah, 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 PSP, whatever. And then the day after it launched, I started seeing all these videos come out of all the games that were available, and I saw Luminous, and that Luminous instantly sold me on the PSP. So it was funny because a day after the launch of the PSP is when I went and bought one. And then I had a bunch of broken pixels on it, and I had to exchange it anyway. So yeah, so I even had to wait longer. But yeah, but when the Vita was coming out, and it was like an OLED screen, I remember that, I was kind of against the PSP at the time. And the Vita's going to be better than the PSP, and it uses the cards, it doesn't have the UMD. I was getting all hyped for this. And but what really sold me on getting really hyped for this were the games at launch. There were 4 games for me that were must-haves for the Vita at launch. And one of them, the one that I really most wanted, was Hot Shots Golf World Invitational. I played this forever, and it was awesome. Hot Shots Golf, my favorite golf game, and this is, I think, the best one of the bunch. Then, of course, I had to get Luminous Electronic Symphony. Now, of course, this is very similar to the other Luminous games, just for the Vita, but had to get it because I was a big fan of Luminous. A new Wipeout game was on the Vita, Wipeout 2048. Awesome. And then also another game series that I was really, really into, Touch Mike Katamari, the Katamari Damacy series. And I couldn't believe these 4 games were launched. I know there was Uncharted 2, but at the time I really didn't care about Uncharted. I have the Uncharted game now, I still haven't played it on the Vita. But, yeah, so the thing that really blew me away after I started playing it was the screen. Now, this has the OLED screen, which looks amazing. It really does. And it's really unfortunate that when they did the Vita Slim that they went back to just a regular LED, because the OLED is really what makes this shine, I think. Now, there were a couple downsides to this. There were a couple things that I was disappointed about. And one of the main things that I was disappointed about is that the everything, because it has a touch screen on the front, so the games were just kind of trying to force you to use the touch screen. I think like every single one of these games, you couldn't start the game just by hitting start or hitting a button. Nope, you had to hit the start button on the screen. And that just kept putting fingerprints on the screen. I was like, this is totally unnecessary. I don't need to touch the screen. I mean, they could very easily hit buttons to make your menu selections, because you wind up touching the screen all over, and then you don't play the game, and you don't have to touch the screen at all. They were kind of forcing in the gimmicks. And I kind of was hoping that over time they would patch the games so you could just hit the button. And I don't know, some of them did, some of them didn't. But it was just a mess. The analog nubs were something that a lot of people wanted, and but they wound up not being as good as people wanted. They don't have that much of a range. They're very tiny. That was another complaint. I think the games like Wipeout, you have to really adjust the way you use the analog stick compared to a regular PlayStation controller. And I think that the Nintendo 3DS slide pad actually works a lot better than these analog nubs, because it's a very limited range of motion. Yeah, it's just like the things that would force the gimmicks on this is what made this a little bit disappointing. The games, though, are fantastic, and it's still one of my favorite handhelds. So, yeah, let's leave it at that. I've probably talked for 20 minutes or so. And I was kind of hoping I wouldn't, but I did. About 5 minutes per system, and I guess that's the way it has to go. But again, these are once a month, so why not? You know, we'll leave it at that. Visit Novabug's page, and yeah, we'll leave it at that. Thanks everyone for watching. Till next time. Bye.